Straight up, this is my favorite fight on the card. And it's not because the fighter on the right-hand side shares the same last name that we do. And happened upon our YouTube video where we didn't pick Brendan Allen to win one of his fights. We have Ian the Hurricane Heinisch taking on Brendan All-In Allen. And what's not to love about this fight? I mean, Ian Heinisch, when he went out and fought Gerald Mearshart, came out like Khalil Roundtree did when he went over to Tiger Muay Thai and became Bangkok ready. And Ian Heinisch looked like a totally different fighter, and he was on a 2-fight losing streak, former LFA champ. I mean, he lost that fight to Marcus Perez at one time, but after that, he was on a great run. And LFA middleweight champs and fighters in this fight, we have two of them because Brendan Allen, your former LFA middleweight champ, and since coming into the UFC has looked amazing. I mean, he had the win over Moises Marietta, kept that title, Moses Marietta. Then he beat Aaron Jeffrey, huge Canadian prospect. Okay. Then he had a win over Kevin Holland, submitted him. He got cracked in that fight. Then he knocked out Tom Breeze, and then he beat Kyle Dawkins in a fight that was insane. Like, I don't think that fight gets enough credit, and I just want to say this. Kyle Dawkins lost that fight. He's got a fight coming up. They gave him a big step down in competition in my eyes. But this fight, holy smokes. Like, this is a great fight.
It's just wild that those are Brendan Allen's 3 first fights in the UFC. Like, you have a stoppage win over Kevin Holland, a guy who seems to fight every other weekend now, and people love him. And now he's beefing with the middleweight champion. So having a win over a guy like that is really important. And I kind of have these 3 guys in a bit of a triangle because they all do a lot of things very similar. When you look at their games, they're all, they can all strike, they can all wrestle, they all have good jiu-jitsu. They don't have massive weaknesses. I would say Ian Heinisch, he's very unique in this way. He just kind of keeps a labored pace throughout a whole fight where he'll be huffing and puffing in the first round and you're like, wow, he's exhausted. But by the third round, his pace does stay the same. It's just kind of like a body language thing. You're like, wow, Ian Heinisch. They might need to stop it on the stool. And then he goes out and gets 7 takedowns and throws a crazy amount of volume the next round. I'm interested to see how his kind of new Muay Thai style will be incorporated into this fight, because if he comes out here just throwing kicks like crazy, Brendan Allen only needs to catch one and take you down, and then it's an absolute nightmare if that guy gets on top of you. And that's the great thing about this fight too. No matter what stage this fight takes place at, even if Brendan Allen is on top of Ian Heinisch, it's not like Ian Heinisch is out of it. Even if Ian Heinisch is throwing leg kicks and, snapping his leg back every single time. Like, both guys are matched up so well with each other that no matter what happens in this fight, I think it's going to be a super competitive match.
And that's the thing. You look at Ian Heinisch's record, and is he a slouch on the ground? Well, he beat Cesar Ferreira and Antonio Carlos Jr. Now, I know Cesar Ferreira isn't in the UFC anymore, but still, those are 2 big wins over guys that are definitely dangerous on the ground. And for All-In Allen, I mean, what's not to love? The striking, maybe, but his ground game's so good. And listen, Kyle Dawkins really exposed some flaws. Maybe Ian Heinisch can try and pick up on those. And you might see it on the graphic that I have up in front, too. Ian Heinisch has spent time at Genesis Training Center, or Training Academy for this one. And I looked at the picture of some of the guys that he's been training with. Neil Magny's one of the main guys, but Grant Neal at that gym, Anthony Sugarfoot Adams that you saw in Contender Series, JJ Aldrich is there too, so there's that. But Ian Heinisch, decent quality camp as well. You might have recognized him from Factory X at a point. He spent time again in Thailand getting ready for his last fight for part of that camp and came out and looked like a totally different fighter. So this fight should be really interesting. I mean, these guys have beef. This fight was supposed to happen earlier on in the year. Now Brendan Allen has to defend his training partner and coach's honor in Gerald Mearshart, not just for the Khamzat Chimaev loss, but that Ian Heinisch loss as well. So there's a lot of different things to like about this. The other thing too, Brendan Allen's super young. Like, he's at 18 pro fights, and he's going to step into the cage at 24 years, 10 months, 1 week, and 3 days old. How insane is that?
Very insane, because he's only 2 years older than me, and I haven't done any of that stuff. I'm really intrigued by this fight just to see what both guys get matched up with next, because middleweight is kind of in this new, not really revolution, but we are seeing a lot of new guys starting to make their way up near the top of the rankings. And for Ian Heinisch to fight a guy outside the top 15, we don't really see it a lot. We have a guy with a number next to their name actually fighting a guy outside of the rankings. It just tells you how serious he is about this fight. And Brendan Allen, the sky really is the limit. I mean, we've been critical of him in the past, but when you look at what he's been able to do lately and the string of fights he's been able to put together, yes, the Dawkins fight might be a little concerning depending on how you look at it, but to TKO Tom Breeze and to choke out Kevin Holland, like, I don't think people realize just how monumental of a task that is.
Yeah, and I mean, to back up, okay, Tom Breeze, a lot of people were critical on him. He had a hard time making the walk to the octagon. Did you watch his fight against KB Buller? People were really high on KB Buller, and he beat the brakes, to use a Matt Allen term. He beat the brakes off of KB Buller. When Tom Breeze is on, he's on. Maybe he was off in the Allen fight, but Allen looked great in that one. Allen. Let's not take too much away from him.
Exactly, and on the ground too, I will be really interested to see if Brendan Allen can take Ian Heinisch down, because Ian Heinisch has a weird kind of grappling defense. When he fights a pure jiu-jitsu guy and they try to take him down, it seems like his wrestling is enough to kind of get him over that hump and keep the fight on the feet. But when he fought Omari Akhmedov, you saw more of a traditional wrestler, and he was able to wear down on Ian Heinisch. No, he wasn't able to really hold him down and control him for any real period of time, but you could tell that labored pace, I guess, will get to him. He's a really good fighter going forwards, but if you can force him backwards, it's really uncomfortable for him, because if you're a really powerful striker and a wrestler, you're not used to going backwards. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. So if Brendan Allen can start to string together strikes, he has a really good jab. He can work his way in with that. I do like his takedowns from the clinch, but this fight is 100% based on how good is the takedown defense of Ian Heinisch and how good is the cardio of Brendan Allen. Because if Brendan Allen can keep up with Ian Heinisch and really threaten with takedowns constantly, and if he's able to get on top for maybe a round, really hurt Ian Heinisch, threaten with submissions, but in another round, Ian Heinisch is lighting him up on the feet. Like, it's so dynamic throughout every aspect. That's what makes this fight so hard to pick.
Again, yeah, like, we've seen this fight from Ian Heinisch. We've seen him face fighters somewhat similar to this, and he's gotten taken down, but he's gotten back up. He's rallied in some of them. He's lost some of them, too. So if we have a look at the odds, they're pick'em odds. I mean, all the way across the board. They open at pick'em odds. The line shifted for Brendan Allen, I guess, really early on. People were putting some money on Allen to the tune of, he was at a minus 170 at one point. Now it's come back up, and a lot of people are high on Ian Heinisch at this point. If we have a look at the Tapology picks, 771, 78% going Brendan Allen, 67% saying he's going to get the win by decision. Again, I see it much more closely, and this is one of the tougher fights for me to pick because, A, it's a pop and popcorn fight for me. I'm not putting any cheddar down on this one. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it's worth because it is such a tough call. If I have to make a pick, like I said, I've seen Ian Heinisch in these type of fights before. He's won some and he's lost some. And for me, Brendan Allen is on such an upward trajectory to this point. It's hard not to side with Brendan Allen. It is a tough fight to try and go with. I can see a path of victory for both guys. I'm kind of spinning my wheels here, but I will go with Brendan Allen, just due to the fact that if he gets it to the mat quickly in that first round, you got to get it done. Because if he doesn't, I think as the fight moves on, like you said, Ian Heinisch is going to pick up steam. So maybe if Ian Heinisch isn't totally compromised at the end of the first round, maybe I will live bet, but I'm going Brendan Allen here.
So I was going to pick Brendan Allen, but he's not going to win this. The cardio and the leg kicks of Ian Heinisch are going to be too much for Brendan Allen, I believe, because you have to deal with, A, the constant pressure of Ian Heinisch, but if your body and your legs start to give out on you and you're not getting those takedowns, Antonio Carlos Jr. had Ian Heinisch's back and he couldn't finish him. I don't think Brendan Allen's at that level in jiu-jitsu. Like, Antonio Carlos Jr., here's a good example. Tim Boach, maybe not on that level, but you look at least what he's able to do on the ground to some of these guys and the way he cuts through most guys' guard and gets into full mount, takes their back like it's nothing. The fact that Ian Heinisch was able to just completely Grammy roll his way out of the majority of his takedown attempts and get back up to his feet, I think those fights have kind of made him ready for this fight against Brendan Allen. If Brendan Allen wins, the sky's the limit, and I'll never pick against him again. We have similar hair, and we have the same last name, but I think Ian Heinisch can be able to get this one done by decision. This is my fight of the night, though.
Matt, I'm going with Brendan Allen. You're going with Ian Heinisch. This should be a great fight. Sit back and enjoy it, and also sit back and check out the playlist. The Fight Night picks. Hey, we've got a great main event. Go over to Teixeira taking on a really tough out in Thiago Santos. So keep it locked in with Fight Night picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.